Hello everybody, Sheila Willis with the History Check app. Here we are again. Please don't download the app at historycheck.ca. And I have with me Brittany Romano. Did I say it right?
Yeah.
Oh, thank goodness. From Tree Time Services. They're kind of a split company, but we're here for the archaeological side of it, and I always stumble over the word, and I apologize.
Oh, no, that's fine.
So do you want to tell us what it is in your archaeological services that you do?
Yeah, so basically there's 3 types of archaeology that kind of happens in the province.
Mm-hmm.
So the first type is academic, so field schools. It's kind of what people think about kind of Indiana Jones as a professor.
Yeah.
The second type is research. So research could be the Edmonton Archaeological Society of Alberta. We often do a survey at Brazeau Reservoir. And I'll talk more about that later because that site was actually discovered by people going out for their walking their dog, and now it's led to a lot of really exciting finds.
Cool.
So research could happen just if a society member wants to run a project and get people going. Sometimes it'll be with a university as well, but it doesn't have to be. So someone, they can do a joint partnership with it. And then like the third type, and that's the type that is the most common in Alberta, is CRM, Cultural Resource Management.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah, so before housing development has to go in or a pipeline, they'll send someone out like me to go see if there's an archaeological site.
Yeah.
And if we do find a site, then they either will try to modify the development so they won't impact it and destroy it, or we'll do an excavation. So there's been a lot of excavations up in Fort McMurray. There's also been some around Edmonton, like the Walter Dale Bridge. But yeah, so that's one of my main job right now is to go out and try to find sites so they're not destroyed by development. So we kind of looked for places that you might want to go camping on. So it kind of starts actually in the office. Like a lot of people think of Indiana Jones, you're just right out there and everything, but the first step's actually kind of in the office, and we use satellite imagery, LiDAR. We have a database of known sites, and we look for areas that are next to water as well in certain landforms. So what's a place that would give you access to water that would be high and dry with maybe good vantages all around you? So when we're in the office, we actually mark out places that we want to go test out in the field.
Oh, okay.
And then we have to get to those places. And so last week I was just up in a helicopter flying out of the Fort McMurray dump of all places. Not my favorite place to fly out of.
Yeah, I imagine.
Lots of garbage swirling around you. But once we got past the dump, we had some really nice views. And we will quad places. Sometimes it's like right, you can walk from the truck, which is nice. We've used Argos, so kind of have to get out there by whatever means.
Whatever means necessary.
Yeah. And then, we go put shovel tests in the ground and see if we can find sites.
So when you're looking for a site like in the office, and I guess the best way I can think is if I threw myself back 400 or 500 years in time, where would be a good place that I would stay dry, that I have access to some sort of probably food, maybe whether it be fish and water.
Yeah.
And just basically, like you said, what would we camp in?
Yeah.
That's what you're after, kind of.
Exactly, and you're really right about thinking, like, we can't just look at the landscape today and say that's what it was like, 100 years ago, like shorelines. And fluctuate. So we have to look at like old shorelines sometimes too. We find really large sites around there and everything. And I guess I should kind of clarify what I mean by archaeological site.
Oh, yeah.
Because the common joke that archaeologists will almost always make is we don't do dinosaurs. It's a really easy misconception to make because we use the same kind of methods. Because if you want to take something out of the ground, you use like a shovel and screened. So we use a lot of the same methods, but we don't do dinosaurs. We look at people, and then paleontologists look at dinosaurs, and they can also look at ancient like fossils of plants and stuff like that. So we don't do that. Once in a while, sometimes those two worlds do collide, like at Brazeau. We found fossilized fossilized horse bone
Oh,
there.
really?
Yeah, and along next to spear points that are some were over 10,000 years old.
Mhm.
I don't know, like that site's still being researched.
Yeah.
So I don't know where if the horse bone was found right next to
To
the
the-
artifacts, but
yeah.
it's probably one of
Was
the.
it supper? Is
Yeah.
the question,
Yeah,
right?
but we do know that
Mhm.
people would hunt
Mhm.
horses like
Mhm.
back, 10,000 years ago.
You took what you had available.
Yeah, exactly.
So.
So we look a lot for stone tools, so any types of spearheads, arrowheads. One of the most common things we find that people don't get too excited about is flakes.
Mhm.
So when you make a stone tool, you take a rock and you chip off little bits of stone. And
Mhm.
so we'll find a lot of those chips of stone. And sometimes it can be kind of, a lot of people won't find that really exciting. But at Brazeau, there's one area where it looks like, based on the pattern of the flakes,
Mhm.
it looks like someone was sitting kind of right in one spot and then kind of flint knapped around them. So
Mhm.
it's kind of in a crescent pattern.
Oh,
So you
cool.
can maybe tell where someone was sitting like thousands of years ago.
So would the flakes be enough for one point, or would it be multiple points?
That's a really good question. There's two different colors of the stone material, so we think that they were making two different.
Oh, okay,
Stone
so it
tools
was just
there.
kind of his
Yeah.
comfortable, handy little perch that he was happy at.
Yeah, exactly.
And who knows, maybe it was a sheep.
Yeah, there's a lot of women would make tools too, so
Mhm.
especially things like scrapers, often
Mhm.
thought of as a women's tool.
Mm-hmm.
We also will find, this past summer, we found obsidian.
Oh.
So just a tiny little flake, but if obsidian only comes from volcanoes, but there's no volcanoes in Alberta.
So it was traded somewhere along the way.
Traded, or people may have gone on like a certain kind of quest to go grab it, or just trade routes as well.
Oops.
There's a researcher right now who's working with people with private collections, and he can basically take this like radar kind of, it looks like a little radar gun, and he just kind of zaps it, so he doesn't need to like break off a piece, and he can tell you which volcano that is coming
Really?
from. Yeah, so
That's exciting.
it is really, because people can't believe like if that they are holding something that came from maybe Washington or
Yeah,
from
Mount Hood or wherever.
yeah, and so some patterns are kind of starting to merge with that. So
Yeah.
his work has largely been possible too because of people sharing what they have in their private collections.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Cool.
And yeah, and then of course historic buildings as well that
Yeah.
we found. So we once found a ferry and
Oh, really?
yeah,
Fun.
in the middle of the woods
Yeah.
near Fort Vermilion, and then we've registered a plane crash in Slave Lake as well.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, just almost anything that's old and has to do with people we deal with.
Cool. Fort Vermilion. I'm going to bring this up right now, and I hope you don't mind, but I need to give a plug for one of my first municipal alliances was McKenzie County.
Oh yeah.
What a great bunch of people up there, I find anyways, and I'm so sorry for them for what they're going through right now. But if you want to go, Fort Vermilion is one of the first European settlements, pardon me, it is the first European settlement in Alberta, and just being in Fort Vermilion to me gives me that feeling. I mentioned earlier that the golf course, their clubhouse is a HBC building. Their
I've been
hardware
there. It's
store.
beautiful.
It's
Yeah.
it's like you're walking in all the conveniences, but what a great place. I just love Fort Vermilion. I'm sorry I had to throw that in there.
No, have you seen their bed and breakfast that they're trying to open
No.
up there? So it's in a historic building. They're doing renovations. They're working with people from the museum.
Mhm.
And once it's open, because the whole area there is beautiful.
Yeah.
And there's so much. I worked for McKenzie County near their just north of the town on the river, and we
Yeah.
found so many archaeological sites.
Not
Area's
surprising.
just rich in history. It's amazing.
It's hugely rich
yeah.
in history.
And it's really beautiful up there
Yeah.
along the river.
right on the river.
Yeah.
And yeah, anyways, I could just go on forever. I need to go back up there then. But in my neck of the woods, which is kind of in the Slave Lake region, I'm not going to get too much more specific than that. Again, we often now, I may be right and I may be wrong, and I just from word of mouth and logic, many of our recreational trails were the original trails coming up, and prior to that, they would have been Indigenous trails.
Yeah.
You know, so I think you know what I'm leading up to on the Peace River Trail near
Yeah.
Smith. Go for it.
Okay, so exactly what you said, like we
Yeah.
tend to think that when fur traders came up here, they established these pathways and fur trading posts, and then people came to them. But it's the opposite. They tried to go to where people were already living and use pathways that people are already using.
Mhm.
So when you're walking along like the Peace River Trail, the history sometimes is so much more, it's just so much older than you'd expect. So
Yeah.
working there, we found an Oxbow point.
Mhm.
So an Oxbow point is, I brought this book too.
Okay,
If you ever find a point, this is like the best book in for Alberta. So we can tell, just like today, technology changes over time.
Yeah.
So I always like to point out with kids too, if you show them like a smartphone and then a cell phone from even 10 years, 5
Yeah.
years ago, they can tell you which one was older, and it's because of the size and shape. So
And if you show them a rotary phone, they haven't got a clue.
yeah,
Anyways, I'm sorry.
no, it's really different. So
Yeah.
we can tell how old something is sometimes by the size and the shape of the projectile point. So a lot of people will find something, even like the Oxbow point. Sorry, I should have pulled it up earlier.
Yeah, and I have a photo of this, by the way, that Tree Time put out on their Facebook page, and they have a really cool Facebook page and blog, and I'll share that within the comments within the next several days. But,
Yeah,
Yeah.
so people will find something like an Oxbow point like this, and they'll say that they found an arrowhead. But Oxbow points didn't actually belong on the ends of arrowheads. If you would try to shoot out of an arrow, it would just kind of go like that.
Yeah.
They're too big.
yeah,
Yeah, they were actually used at the end of a dart point with an addle. So you have a video that
I do.
that you're gonna post. So the way I often too kind of explain it, it's like, have you been to a park and you've seen people throw a ball for their dog, but using one of those ball throwing
Yeah,
kind of
it's, it's the stick with the ball in the end.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's kind of an atlatl is the same, but you put a spear
yeah,
in the end.
exactly.
and wing it.
It
And-
allows you to throw
Yeah.
further and further with less effort.
Yeah.
Which, that's what I would like to do, put
Yeah,
less effort.
less effort, the better, right?
Yeah. So we found an Oxbow point right next to the trail. My coworker, I think Madeline,
Mhm.
found it, or at least it was her project. I went back later to go actually test out the site,
Mhm.
which actually it's very vivid in my mind. We didn't find anything else.
Mhm.
They found more stuff when they were there earlier.
Yeah.
We just threw in a couple, but it was kind of like a day like today where the sky's kind of dark,
Yeah,
and suddenly I actually was there with my husband who
Mhm.
also works at Tree Time, and suddenly all we could hear was the sound of wolves howling.
oh, really?
It felt like we were just surrounded by
Mhm.
them. So that's
Perhaps your testing wasn't.
Yeah.
Didn't last as long as it may have.
Yeah. We're like, we're
Yeah.
done. No,
Yeah.
we had actually just put up, when we find a site, that one was avoided, so
Mhm.
it hasn't been disturbed, and we had
Nice.
just finished up putting flagging so they wouldn't disturb the site, so it was good
Mhm.
timing, but
Yeah.
it's a very eerie site, and it's just right off the trail there, and so Oxbow points like this, the way that I kind of like to describe them too, we do a lot of outreach with schools as well, is they remind me of little Mickey Mouse
Yeah.
kind
the
of ears.
Mickey Mouse ears on the
Yeah,
end.
and they're about 4,500 to 4,100 years ago.
So basically, we can now definitively know that the Peace River Trail was used 4,100 years ago.
It's right next to the site, and you have to think about too, what we want to walk on now, if you're just walking the bush, is what other people also
Yeah.
wanted to walk on.
Yeah.
And it's why that trail kind of exists there in the first place. So
Mhm.
people traveled all over. Sometimes we come across people too who they're always surprised that we find
Mhm.
all this stuff, but people were just everywhere. If we're finding sites where we have to get
Mhm.
dropped off by helicopter too, you can just imagine.
Yeah. Where the routes and the crisscrosses and
Yeah.
shortcuts were,
And-
essentially.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
it makes sense too, because if you're traveling along a muskeg, if it's summer, well, you're not going to travel in the
Right,
muskeg.
no.
But if it's winter, you'll probably still want to set up camp like on a ridge next to it too.
Yeah.
So that site was really exciting.
Yeah.
It was really neat to go test it out. We've also, I talked about Brazo.
Yeah.
So we found that as working as CRM archaeologists, but some of the neatest things that I've got to see has actually been things that people have shown us and have brought in. So we did an outreach event in Clovis, and a woman comes in and she shows us. It's on our blog. So if you go through it, you can find it. The artifact doesn't have a name because we don't know what it is. But it's like a groundstone. It looks like a plate or a bowl, and someone has like ground it down so it like almost like a bowl, but it's not quite. And at the very bottom, it almost looks like, how some plates have that like kind of little stand or something, almost like that, but not quite. But it's all been ground stone, and we had never seen or heard of anything like that. So we brought it to we introduced them to people who worked at the RAM. They had never seen anything like that as well. So just a totally unique artifact that this woman had in her family. And so she was concerned about it because her kids weren't as interested. Because that's the thing, not all of your kids are going to have the same interests as you as much as you want them to.
Yeah.
Right? And so she wanted to look into maybe donating it to the museum or finding more about it. So
and what she found is nobody knows what it is.
Yeah, something totally
This
unique.
is really weird.
Yeah, but then, the people with the obsidian, they get to find out where exactly it came from.
Yeah.
And I mentioned Brazo earlier, so this couple were out walking their dog and they found a cache of what we call bifaces. So bifaces are just stone tools that have had flakes removed from both sides. Sometimes it can be a knife, sometimes it might be, if you're carrying stone material from like Washington, are you going to carry like a big stone, or are you going to...
Yeah, you're going to flick it off.
Yeah, so they could be kind of tool blanks and you can make something later. And they found a huge kind of cache of them just on a tree stump that had thrown over.
Oh, really?
And so they contacted the museum, and so they went out there and they found Clovis, I believe. They for sure found Hell Gap Point. So a Clovis spear point, so that would have been at the end of a spear, because generally it went spear points, then addle, and then arrow. So they're really large, and they found that, and then they found, I actually found my first arrowhead there as well, and my husband immediately found the other half of it.
Yeah,
like,
well, at least it matches.
Yeah, people are joking that we should get like matching tattoos.
Yeah.
Yeah, so they found at that one site pretty much the whole of like this block they found stuff. Not quite as like everything, but something from like over 10,000 years ago to probably a couple hundred years ago.
That's something else.
Yeah, one site now. And so we didn't go this year because the person who runs the project's on maternity leave, and also sometimes you just have to catch up on cataloging. But the Edmonton Society has actually invited people out to participate and participate in the survey. So all the volunteers have found stuff, and it's really all thanks to this one couple
who had the foresight to say, we need to report this.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And so one of the things I want to talk about is what to do if you actually find something. So you can enter in Report a Find Alberta Government, and then there's a website there. You can also tell if you know an archaeologist. So Tree Time, we've had people contact us, and we've either reported the site for them or got them in contact with the government. But this is what you actually need to do. So if you find an arrowhead or something like that, we strongly encourage you to leave it there, because once you remove an object from its context, you can't ever get that back. So like I talked about the flakes being in that exact position, and because of that we know where someone was sitting, so you start to lose those stories and things like that. So if someone found an arrowhead right next to that not an arrowhead, a spear point right next to the horse bone, and then they removed it and we just found horse bone. Well, now we would just say like maybe just a paleontologist would be interested, but as soon as you start to put the artifact with the fossils together, we start to get a different story.
Well, and I would think that there's even another stretch on that. If you found the horse bone and the point together, that you might be more inclined to see, was it somebody riding the horse? That, or are there marks on the bone? So, you know, kind of the story carries on,
yeah,
right?
The story can be really different. The horses that I'm talking about, these ones were, so horses originally kind of developed in North America and then they all died out. So these horses that we found, these ones are like the Ice Age horses.
Ice Age horses, yeah.
So, but if we found horse bone that have butchery marks on it, then that becomes really significant just because of how rare it is.
Yeah.
So we encourage you to leave it where it is, but that doesn't always happen. And sometimes, especially if something's in danger, you find something eroding out of a riverbank. Well, it could just be lost forever then, right?
Take some pictures.
Yeah. And then, I mean, like, you know, people do, like, kids collect or adults get excited and, like, we collect and everything. Like, it just happens. But what they'd really like you to do is to, if you have a GPS, because a lot of people when they're hiking, they might, or even if you have a smartphone and you can drop a pin on your phone, they really want to know the exact location that you found it. Because so my job is to try to find sites so developments don't come in. But sometimes a development comes next to a site that was recorded like 30 years ago. Well, you know, their technology wasn't as great, so if that site center point is off by a couple hundred meters, then that area might not even be flagged, right?
Yeah.
Like, so it's really important to know exactly where it is to protect it.
Yeah.
And then they also want you to take a photo of it because they want to see what you have. So if someone found what they thought is like a bison kill site, sometimes animals just die and it doesn't always make it an archaeological site. Archaeological site has to do with people.
Has to have human involvement in it.
Exactly. So the bones have to be culturally modified. So cut marks, like you said, sometimes we'll find scrape marks on it. Or there's cooking fires. We find a lot of fire cracked rock. Sometimes even bones are broken in a certain way, we can usually say. I know the Ram they used to have on display, I don't know if they have it, we wrote a blog post about it, I believe. It was the one that got away, so they have a bison bone with an arrow point embedded in it.
Oh my.
But the bone's healed over.
Oh, so you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, it had.
Yeah, so that one we could for sure say was archaeological in nature. But that's why a photo is so important, because then maybe they can see a cut mark or they just know what to call the site. And then you send that information to the government and they'll give it what we call a Borda number. So all sites have to have a Borda number. It's just a way to keep track of them in Alberta and in Canada.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah, so, and they're very, very friendly, very open, willing to ask questions, the government, or usually, or you can even go to the society and they can help you with that too, because sometimes people, you know, they don't have a GPS.
About it,
yeah, exactly. Yeah, people do get really nervous about it sometimes, but I think just like lines of communication, we get to learn about things that we haven't heard of or seen, or just maybe a bit more about the area, and then hopefully maybe if they bring in a point, we could tell them how old it is, or maybe the fact that they have something totally unique that people haven't seen.
Yeah, such as a very strange plate type object.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah. So that is very cool. Really good information. So, got anything else you want to add?
No, I think that there is at the Strathcona Library tomorrow, I think they're having a Stones and Bones.
Oh, those things are terrific.
Yeah. So
I've been to a few.
Well, we've had people, that's when that woman brought in the bowl thing.
Yeah.
We've had someone bring in an Ice Age bison. They're like, oh, check out my bison skull. And we're like, did you know that's probably actually like thousands of years old? Just, you can tell by the size and shape of the horns that it's not like a modern bison. Those are dead, like the bison antiquus. So you never know what you can find.
Never know.
So I think it's from 10 to 4. I could try to share that.
Yeah, just put it in the comments, feel
Yeah.
free. So probably 10 to 4, assumedly 10 to 4, Strathcona Library.
Yeah.
Okay. So, cool. Well, there we go for another one. No questions on there? Alrighty. See you next time.